10 seconds.
From the College of Sports Media, this is CSM SportsWrap. Opinions from the brightest minds in the business. Okay, that last part. I made it up.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to CSM SportsWrap. I'm your host, Adam Nightingale, alongside Shane O'Farrell, Jerry Ponte, and Kris Gloeckler. And guys, we got a lot to talk about today, but finally, some positive news in the city of Toronto. Just announced earlier this afternoon, Toronto Argonauts head coach Scott Milanovic named CFL head coach of the year. Round of applause for him. Definitely something nice to see. Had a very successful season.
Well-deserved coach of the year, won there by Scott Milanovic. Took the Argonauts from a team that didn't even make the playoffs the season before and turned them into Super Bowl champions. Obviously, a lot of
Grey Cup champions.
Grey Cup, there we go.
Excuse me. Wow.
They're good, but they're not that good.
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of good acquisitions came along with that, with the Ray acquisition, and they were not. It wasn't just Milanovic and the head coach position, but a very well-deserved award there for the Grey Cup champion. Excuse me there.
Absolutely, and also caught up in the Leafs' misery. I know you're all gonna roll your eyes when I say this, but one Toronto sports team, the Toronto Marlies, did win yesterday, so we got some success.
And as far as national pride goes, it's a pretty good day for that, no?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah,
absolutely it is. And national pride. 3 years ago to this date, something magical happened in Canadian sports.
Up with it again. He's on the ice with Iginla. Iginla scoping. Sidney Crosby, the golden goal, and Canada has once in a lifetime Olympic gold. These golden games have their crowning moment, and why wouldn't it be Sidney Crosby?
Yes, that's right. 3 years ago to this date, Sidney Crosby, the golden goal in the Olympics. Guys, Shane, I know you especially. You were in the United States. You were living in the States watching that game. What was it like?
Well, first of all, it was supremely strange because I was living in California at the time. It's not exactly a hotbed for hockey interest, as we know. Albeit, though, I lived in the Bay Area where they are quite passionate about their Sharks hockey. So there was a number of. I've watched the game in a bar there. There was a number of USA hockey fans there. And it was just really strange, though. I found myself wishing that I was back in Canada the whole time because I wanted some fellow countrymen to be able to share in the moment with. But it was a pretty cool experience. It really made me proud to be Canadian. Really, the contrast, especially being around a bunch of Americans, and it really cemented the fact that this is Canada's game for the time being, at least for one more Olympics. They reign supreme as gold medalists. So it was quite interesting being.
I want to know. What I want to know is how did they react when Parise or Parisi scored? I mean, I remember.
I can't remember how they reacted because I was down on the floor with my head in my hands, just totally crushed by that last minute goal there. But
yeah,
it was
low blow.
It really just set the stage for a more fantastic finish. The way that game ended couldn't have gone down in any more of a memorable fashion than it went down, with Sidney obviously being the goal scorer too, added that much more legitimacy to
from Iginla too, who's been through. He's got two golds.
He's been through all as much as any of the top players. But when you really look at it, I mean, look, you have Paul Henderson from 72. Maybe not the most well-known guy from that team, but he scores the goal. But then after that, 87, you get Gretzky Lemieux making that amazing pass, and now Sidney Crosby, arguably the best player in the NHL today, scoring that goal. Just a magical moment. And I mean, the right player really at the right time scoring the biggest goal the country's had.
And the right place, no less, being in Vancouver on Canadian home soil. It was crazy too, because what happened is a lot of people forget, obviously, the loss to the U.S. in the round robin stage.
Yeah.
And the few friends that I had in California at the time that were devout U.S. hockey fans were really giving it to me after that one, and I didn't have much of a defense because the U.S. really played Canada off the ice in that first game.
They did.
And
now,
for them to come back with the resiliency they did and win on home soil, I mean.
Now we have the reaction from Shane from an American standpoint. The rest of the world, however, took notice as well.
And the USA tied at 2 in overtime. Next goal wins the gold.
Here comes Sidney Crosby, the big man, the Usain Bolt of hockey. Crosby is free. He scores! Rev up the big engine. The Americans are beaten. Canada has gold!
That's right. That is a Caribbean goal call right there. And just to show you how much Sidney Crosby is known around the world, the Usain Bolt of hockey.
Great analogy. I love
that
cross sport comparison, because obviously it's hard to pique interest for hockey in the Caribbean nations, and to make that analogy, I'm sure it really hit home with a lot of Caribbean peoples about how the relevance that Sidney Crosby holds in the game.
I just love hearing the fact that the Americans were beaten. I mean, how many times can Canada say that they've beaten America in a legitimate big-time event?
Well, at least the last 2 gold medals they won were.
Yeah, the last 2 gold medals. Outside of that, I mean, the U.S.
I think, no, it's interesting. Being at 3 years after the fact, it's a good time to look at the current state of hockey, and especially after that last World Juniors run where the U.S. annihilated Canada in the semifinals. I mean, it really has made a lot of Canadian hockey fans paranoid. So it just shows that even back then, the U.S. as a hockey nation were on the rise, and they continue to be to this day. And it's just going to make for a very interesting 2014.
Now, speaking of Canadian hockey fans, there was a large showing of Montreal Canadiens fans at the Air Canada Centre last night. The Leafs fell 5-2 to the Montreal Canadiens. They were outshot 40-23 at the end of the game, outshot 28-12 after 2 periods. A lot of people are blaming Ben Scrivens for that 1 week goal on Max Pacioretty. Shane, do you feel that Ben Scrivens was at fault for that loss last night?
Not a chance. Ben Scrivens was the only reason that they even managed to be in that game until the 3rd period. It very easily could have been 5-2 by the end of the second had Scrivens not been standing on his head all night. He played fantastically on that 5-minute penalty kill where Mike Brown for his hit on Josh Georges. So, I mean, like I said, if it wasn't for Scrivens, they would have even had a prayer in last night's game. So I think it's very unfair to blame Scrivens for last night's loss.
Now, Kris, you looked at it and saw Ben Scrivens 8 straight starts. You said that you thought that UC Runa should have had a start. Why?
Well, he wasn't there last night, but through 8 straight starts for a goaltender is a pretty significant amount. If he starts tonight, I don't know. I don't think he should. But I read a report today saying that they might give Ryman the weekend off to heal his knee a little more. I
don't see that happening.
I don't see it.
I'd be
I don't know
extremely
why
surprised
they would.
if they gave him another 3 days to rest. He's back in the lineup. He's officially returned from injury as of last night. He was on the bench. So I don't see why you wouldn't give Scrivens a break.
Yeah, and back-to-backs, I don't see why they would put Scrivens in again. But like I said, I would like to see Runas play one and see. I mean, he's a goaltender, right? All you do is stop pucks. I mean, he doesn't have the greatest record in the AHL right now, but, I mean, hey.
Now,
I think the nature of Scrivens' play, he'd been playing fantastic. Obviously, last night was a bit of a bogey game for him, but as so often is the case with the Leafs, it's not that they lost last night, it's how they lost, and especially that being the fact that it was against their much hated rivals, the Montreal Canadiens. If you told me that Scrivens was going to get all 8 starts in the absence of Ryman, and you told me that his stat line was going to be the way it looked right now, and he was going to have as many wins, and the Leafs were still going to be 12-9 after this point, I just don't think you can complain, because the Leafs are in a position where few expected them to be at the start of the season, and then especially after Ryman goes down in that Philadelphia game, I don't think many people saw them being able to maintain their playoff spot in the absence of Ryman, because Scrivens hadn't proved much into this point, but I think at this stage, Scrivens has at least proved he's not a starting goalie, but he's definitely an NHL caliber goalie, a guy that you can have as a number 2. And heck, maybe even one day he matures into that starting goaltender. But what you've seen from Scrivens so far, I think you can be nothing but positive on your first and second impression of him.
Now, you mentioned the Flyers, and I just want to backtrack here just a little bit. UC Runas made his first career NHL start last season against the Flyers. He allowed 7 goals on 30 shots. Jerry, in a shortened season, do you risk putting in an inexperienced goaltender?
No, you can't. They had to roll with Scrivens. They didn't have much choice. With Ryman out, they had no other contingency plan. They had the opportunity to put Runas in, but as Shane mentioned, Scrivens was starting to get on a roll. He was playing well, so they had to roll with him, and that's what they did. And it's got them to a 12-9 point. So it's got them to a 12-9 record so far. So right now they're still in good position, and I have to expect Ryman to start tonight, as well as Scrivens has played. to give him this long of a stretch, if Reimer's ready to go, you got to throw him in there.
Well,
You're playing,
Yeah, he got 40 shots. They didn't get into New York till 3 a.m. because of their flight.
and that's
They can't start Scrivens.
That's all well and fair, but okay, Reimer took the morning. If he was on the ice this morning, he should be ready. By now he should be okay to go. Of course, we're not going.
He is okay. He officially returned last night. He didn't start, but
He was
available.
He
for
was
backup
available
duty.
for backup, and if he's ready to go, you got to put him in there. Scrivens, as well as he's played, and full credit to him for going through. He's still young as well. You can't get him to go through this long stretch without giving Reimer a little bit of games to be back. Because if Reimer's your number one, you have to get him back there, and it's a perfect opportunity. As well as the Islanders have played, this is still the New York Islanders we're talking about. This is a perfect game, and it's on the road. He won't feel the pressure of being at home. It's a perfect game to get him back.
Sorry, Kris, go ahead.
Well, you're going to get Matt Fratton back in the next few games, too, which is good because he's a point per game right now. That's a big upside for the Leafs.
And that's an improvement on their team because they still need, we've always talked about how they still need that secondary scoring. Matt Fratton is another offensive guy that they can throw in the lineup and can improve their team. So right now, Toronto's getting healthy at the right time.
It's just, I don't know, the mood in the city following last night's loss just shows the roller coaster ride that is the Toronto fan base. I mean, their win against the Flyers on Monday night, they looked great. They played a very stout defensive game, very Randy Carlyle-esque game.
Their penalty kill was great.
Their penalty kill was great. They got just enough offense when they needed it, and they got goals goals from Kessel and Grabowski, and those are the guys they need to get going. And then they come out, and I'm telling you this: if they had only lost 3-2, or if they managed to get it to an overtime loss or a shootout loss last night, it wouldn't be this bad of a backlash from the fan base today, because people are ticked off in this city. I know my roommate that I live with now went to the game last night, and he was just telling me the atmosphere in that building last night, especially in the third period, was horrible.
Just fell flat.
It just no Leafs fans making their voices heard, and just a Canadians parade at the end, taking over in that third period, letting the ole ole chants rain down from the Raptors. I mean, it's tough to watch, but I mean, let's just keep in mind Scrivens did make 8 straight starts, and the Leafs are still in playoff position. It's not the sky is falling in Toronto.
And Montreal's a pretty hot team.
Montreal, 9 straight games now, they've recorded at least a point. They're one of the hottest, if not the hottest team in the NHL, number 1 in the East. I mean, it's okay to lose to them, especially considering that the last time you played them, you beat them 6-0, and then the time before that, you beat them 2-1. So you still own the better record in the season series. It's not doom and gloom, but yet this city likes to paint a picture like it is.
You're listening to CSM Sports Wrap. Adam Nightingale alongside Shane O'Farrell, Jerry DuPont, and Kris Gloeckler. We're talking about the Maple Leafs and their loss to the Montreal Canadiens last night. Shane, you mentioned it. Randy Carlyle said it in his postgame last night. The team was just flat. And one of the things that stood out to me the most was Mikhail Grabowski's penalty shot. I know a lot of players have this belief that you go in slower, you take a slower approach, and it kind of gets the goalie a little bit out of his, a little bit confused, for lack of a better word, because he's not expecting you to come in that slow. But I mean, your team's losing. The energy is already low in the building. You'd think that you would go out there, try, something, skate a little bit harder.
To a certain extent, I see what you're saying, Adam, but it doesn't really matter. The only end result matters is that he didn't score.
Yeah.
If he goes in there with blazing speed and rips one off the post, it doesn't matter. He didn't score,
But I mean, he goes in there and blazes one off the post. The crowd gets excited. The crowd thinks it's coming close.
Because
that brings a little bit of a buzz
they
to the
still
building.
missed the penalty shot.
Yeah, I mean,
they didn't capitalize on the opportunity.
If you still miss on it, it's still
matter.
a miss. But okay, to his point, I think what he's trying to say is the way Grabowski approached the penalty shot was really the way the team approached the game. They came out, it was a very flat attempt, really. And when you look at it, Montreal dominated a lot of the game. And that's why Scrivens played really well last night. When you really take a look at it and how well Montreal played, Scrivens made a lot. That game could have been a blowout much quicker than it was.
Jerry, you make a good point. And this is what comes back to me. Sometimes I really question the knowledge of this fan base in Toronto. Everybody around the league looks at Toronto. They're the mecca of a lot of Torontonians look at Toronto as the Canadian mecca of hockey, and the ACC sold out every night. Yes, we hear about the bad atmosphere, but after 2 periods of that game, the crowd should have been vocal and on their feet, because the Leafs had no business being in that game. Yet here they were after 2 periods, tied at 2, much because of, like we've been mentioning, the play of Ben Scrivens was quite stellar for the first 2 periods last night. Yes, he fell apart in the third, but the atmosphere heading into that third period, the fans in that building should have known that the Leafs were fortunate to be where they were, and they still had a chance to win that game, and they should have. And my roommate last night telling me the Let's Go Blue Jays chant started breaking out in the third period. I question the knowledge of this fan base.
It's disgusting sometimes to hear that.
It will disgusting. It might be a bit too strong of an adjective, or but like.
Disappointing, maybe a better word.
It is disappointing, and that's what I'm saying. I question the knowledge of this fan base because what do they expect from this team?
But see, that's the problem with Toronto. That's been the problem with Toronto is they'll play on a good, consistent run, beating teams like a Philadelphia, beating teams like New Jersey and Montreal. But then they'll play a clunker against Carolina, and then at home, and then fans are like, "Oh, here we go again." Leafs win one, they lose one. They win one, they look good, they look terrible.
Roller coaster ride.
These fans in Toronto are so fickle because they get so nervous that this team is going to explode and then blow up, and then they're going to be the same as they were last year, 2 years ago, and then 3 years ago, and then they're back to the same old
That's a
leagues.
fact that a lot of Toronto fans don't want to face is much, largely speaking, this is the same team from last year, from 2 years ago, from 3 years ago. They're doing it with the same cast of characters. And as Groucho Marx and Albert Einstein and all these guys have been quoted as saying, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. This is a roster that is a high turnover from last year, and last year they were an 80-point team in an 82-game season. I'm not saying they don't have the talent to get it done this year, because you're seeing the emergence of the guys like Kadri, and we touched on Matt Fratton, and there's a few pieces like Komarov and Clement that have been nice additions. So there is that possibility that they're a little bit better of the team that could get them over the hump this year. But Toronto fans need to face the facts that this is not a Pittsburgh Penguins, this is not a Detroit Red Wings, this is not an elite team, and they should be grateful for the position the Leafs are in right now. And this whole Let's Go Blue Jays crap breaking out in the third period of last night's game, I have no time for that.
And the problem is in Toronto, we hear that a lot. I mean, that's what it boils down to. I think because this city doesn't have another go-to team. And you know what? The Toronto Rock doesn't get enough credit in this city because they win championships.
That's a whole different argument.
That's a whole different argument.
It's the same thing with the Argos. It's a sporting climate
and that's
here.
the problem. Everyone in Toronto is so focused on the Leafs, Raptors, and now with everything the Blue Jays have done. That's why I think it's critical that the Blue Jays get off to a good start. Otherwise, this city is going to be
Otherwise, are we going to start hearing in the 8th and 9th inning, "Let's go Maple Leafs" chants?
That's the thing. It's just going to be a turnaround.
This city is just going to become a laughingstock if it hasn't already, because these fickle fans and these brainless fans need to be,
because they have nothing.
They need to be ostracized. If you guys,
mad
if
passion,
I'm in the,
Shane, mad passion.
If I'm in the Rogers Center this year and I hear "Let's go Maple Leafs" chants, I'm going to turn around and smack somebody because.
Because that's the problem. It's the passion that this city has. The passion, it has the fire, the energy, the emotion to get into the things. But as soon as something goes bad, they start to reverse their tracks and go to the next team.
You're right, Jerry. They do have the passion, but sometimes it's horribly misplaced.
Yeah, and I want to give a perfect example. Like Shane, you know what it's like in Oakland. You've been there a lot. And the Oakland Raiders fan, they're a passionate, rabid bunch. But even if their team goes bad, they're still they're not gonna turn on the team completely.
Well, if I'm a rabid fan of the Leafs, why are you playing Colton Orr more minutes than your first line center and Tyler Bozak?
Do you want to know why? Because they weren't producing.
And 10 seconds
That's what
less
it was.
than JVR.
I know a lot of people are making a lot of noise about that. I just think it was the nature of the game last night. Nobody on the Leafs offense was on their game last night. Not the first, second, or third line. The fourth line was the best line last night, and Carlisle rode with them. Obviously, it was a very lackluster performance from many Leafs last night, but that's a microcosm of the season. That's not the story of the year so far. But yet these fickle fans turned on them. And after one bad performance, the sky is falling. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be like that at all.
One Maple Leaf that actually hasn't seen a lot of playing time recently is defenseman John Michael Isles. He last played against the Ottawa Senators on the 16th. We've heard reports that the Carolina Hurricanes may be looking for veteran defenseman around the deadline day. John Michael Isles' name, of course, popping up. He's a veteran defenseman. But Kris, I want to ask you this. Should younger players like Corbinian Hoser, Mike Koska, Mark Fraser, should they be dressing and playing more minutes than over an experienced player?
Over Michael Isles, yes. This season they're playing like they want it more than like Michael Isles is. John Michael Isles might be a veteran, but it's Koska's been playing a lot, and he's been a big part of this team so far.
I totally disagree with that. I think John Michael Isles deserves to be in the lineup. The thing with the Leafs lineup, the blue line, they say it's crowded, but it's not crowded with an abundance of talent. It's a bunch of guys that are 1A and 1B, if you know what I mean. There's nobody that's head and shoulders a first line pairing. Phaneuf and Koska is your first line pairing. It's It's not very good. I'm just going to say that. John Michael Lyles, the last time he was in the lineup against Ottawa, they won 3-0. He scored a goal, albeit an empty netter goal, but he had a good, solid performance. I don't see why he's in the press box. There's one decision by Randy Carlyle that I question.
Well, there's definitely many fans that question Randy Carlyle's decision, but the Toronto Maple Leafs, they aren't the only Toronto sports team struggling. Coming up, we'll talk about the Toronto Raptors. You're listening to CSM Sports Wrap.
We're here asking people from all over what they think of Lipton green tea. Let's hear what people from Texas have to say. How about China? Germany? How about people from the North Pole? Or Mars? What about mimes? Oh, right. People with their jaws wired shut? Yeah, a barbershop quartet. Oh, you guys are great. How about race car drivers? What about you, high school glee club, here on a field trip? Well, that settles it. It sounds like everyone loves the taste of Lipton green tea. With its protective antioxidants from real tea, it's not just good for you, it's to you. Lipton tea can do that.
Welcome back to CSM Sports Wrap. I'm Adam Nightingale alongside Shane O'Farrell, Jerry DuPont, and Kris Gloeckler. Guys, we talked about the Maple Leaf struggles, but believe it or not, they're not the only team who's struggling in Toronto.
Believe it or not, you didn't. No need to preface it with that.
It's hard to believe actually if you think about it.
Okay, because obviously my take on the Leafs was that there's too much doom and gloom right now with the Raptors and their last two losses. There's definitely an appropriate amount of doom and gloom because there's no way you should be losing to the likes of Cleveland and Washington if you're supposedly trying to become a playoff contender. That's just inexcusable.
Well, that's two straight losses for the Raptors. Shane, like you mentioned, teams that they really should be beating: Cleveland 20-38, Washington 18-37.
And Cleveland was without Kyrie Irving, too.
That's the biggest thing.
A big one.
Throw records out the window when Cleveland, who was not a very talented roster to begin with, is missing their best player, and the Raptors get handled easily by them. Then that's it's a little bit of a
makes you
red flag. Yeah, it makes you wonder. And what I'm wondering about is how Andrea Bargnani is still getting minutes.
Oh my goodness.
No, I'm not here to just. Everybody knows the story with Bargnani. I'm not here to just criticize the guy and just take a crap on him, but he's taking minutes away from Jonas Valanciunas.
I think it's safe. I think his Primo Pasta commercial is getting more airtime than he is getting playing time.
Well, you actually see him hit a basket in his Primo Pasta commercial. I haven't seen him do that in quite some time.
I mean, it's
16 minutes.
It's hard to say it, but it's finally time. Andrea Bargnani's time in Toronto has come to an end.
But that's.
And I mean, the fact,
as our program director always says, that's just scratching the surface. Everybody knows that Bargnani needs to go. It's too late to do anything with him this season, having the trade deadline already come and gone. But the thing is, this organization needs a culture change, and this goes beyond the players on the floor. It's a front office thing, and people are speculating that Brian Colangelo may have saved his job with this Rudy Gay trade. I see no possible scenario unfolding in the rest of this season where Colangelo could save his job, because at this point it's been a total failure, the BC era in this city, and it's time to sever the ties and it's time to move on, because I'm looking at what I saw last night and Bargnani getting 16 minutes. I don't think that's Dwayne Casey's doing. I think he's getting pressure from the front office, from Brian Colangelo and the guys up top saying, listen, you need to play Bargnani.
Well, he is a first-round pick. I mean,
who cares what he is? Kwame Brown was a first-round pick. And
the name drop.
So we all know that the MO with Bargnani is, yes, he can shoot, he doesn't play defense, he doesn't rebound. That's too many deficiencies.
Sorta-
He's not a
sorta-
good enough scorer
sort of
to
reminds-
cover those
He
deficiencies.
sort of reminds me like Phil Kessel. He can shoot, but doesn't
Not
play
at all.
defense.
That is a terrible,
No
terrible
way.
analogy. That is terrible.
Now,
Phil Kessel was a point per game player last year. He was an all-star. Andre Bargnani's never even come close to that level. He had a season where, yes, he averaged 17 points. In Chris Bosh's last season, he looked like he had the pieces to move forward in his career and establish himself. And then Chris Bosh left, and he never took over that star role that Brian Colangelo and the Toronto Raptors wanted him to when they signed him to that 5-year, $50 million contract.
Shane, you mentioned that, obviously it's too late now to trade him. The NBA trade deadline is long gone. It's behind us. But is this a potential where, we see, in a way, a Vince Carter 2.0, where the Raptors are forced to make a trade and they don't get anything worthy in return for Andrea Bargnani?
I think at this point there's almost nothing they can get for Bargnani because no one wants to take him off his hands. If they didn't get anything at the trade deadline in the offseason, what are the chances that someone's going to offer you something up?
No.
This is going to be like a situation where they're just going to have to sever ties, either buy out the rest of his contract or wait till he hits free agency and let him walk.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're just going back to your question, Adam, the Vince Carter 2.0 thing. I don't look at this as a similar situation at all because Vince Carter at one time was the, no doubt about it, best player this franchise had. And he brought them to a level that Bargnani's never even come close to bringing them to. And this thing, we're talking about what they could potentially get for Bargnani. It doesn't matter what they get because at this point, it's addition by subtraction. Just getting him off your roster, getting him out of your box score, not eating up minutes from young guys like Jonas Valanciunas is going to be a positive for this franchise. But how they get rid of him, I don't know. But him and Brian Colangelo should be gone this offseason.
Now, you mentioned Brian Colangelo, and a lot of the questions, especially, switching over to hockey just for a split second here, a lot of questions when Brian Burke was fired. A lot of the questions that were asked by reporters, what about Brian Colangelo?
Yeah.
And I think, I do agree that I think that, a lot of people think that, and I believe maybe a lot of media people, believe that the Rudy Gay trade may have saved Brian Colangelo, but I don't think. I think that his time is up in Toronto. I think the fact is that you can't put a team in the playoffs. You need to move on. You need to find another general manager.
And that's the thing, Adam, the playoffs. You're talking about a league, much like the NHL, where more teams make the playoffs every year than miss the playoffs. 16 out of 30 make the playoffs every year. And the Raptors haven't been there in 4 years now, and that's just inexcusable.
And chasing Memphis 6.5 back.
Milwaukee?
Milwaukee,
Chasing
sorry, yes.
No, but I mean, we talked about the fickle fan base in this sporting market, Adam. We've been talking about that in our first block, and the whole Brian Colangelo saving his job with the Rudy Gay trade was just another example of how fickle this fan base was because he got here, they won 5 of their first 7 with him, and it was a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, this team is all of a sudden they're playoff contenders now, and if they're playoff contenders, then Brian Colangelo, pulled a master stroke there, and that saved his job. Not the case.
That was more desperation, I think, than him thinking to save his job. I think when he realized that Brian Burke was out, he was like, "Oh, I could be next. I need to do something big here."
The writing was on the wall before the Brian Burke thing. He knew all season long he was entering a contract, so he had to do something to save his job.
But that's the thing with Colangelo. If this inevitable move to get rid of him was going to be made, why not do it earlier? MLSE was in here to clean house, and they left they took care of the Leafs, which was the baby child, and they left like that middle child and said, you know what, we'll deal with him a little bit later. Let's let it.
Well, I think
play out.
there was signs of growth last year under Dwayne Casey. They didn't have a good record. They were 22-44, but they were expected to be even worse than they were last year. You saw positive signs of growth on the defensive end on the floor, and that players really were buying into Dwayne Casey's system. But this year, it's almost
it's a regression.
Besides the Rudy Gay situation, outside of those 10 games, it's been a regression on both the front end of that trade and now the back end of that trade, having lost to the likes of the Cavaliers minus Irving and then the Wizards.
Yeah, I think the Rudy Gay kind of explosion has moved along now. I think now we need to see more. We need to see extra pieces. Rudy Gay is a fantastic piece to build around, but we need more. We need more from Valanciunas.
Well, how about Landry Fields and Allen Anderson combined yesterday in 55 minutes? They had 8 points.
And that's the thing.
Not going to get it done.
We need to see more from the Toronto Raptors now. It was good that Rudy Gay came in. They went on a bit of a run, but now what's the next step? It can't just be Rudy Gay every night putting 32 to 40 points a night. This team needs more.
And then Rudy Gay is interesting all by himself in the story that he hasn't been very efficient since he's got here. Yes, he's made big buckets. He's helped them beat playoff caliber teams like the Clippers, like the Knicks. They beat them twice since he's got here, like the Pacers. Those are quality wins, but he's shooting less than 40% in his time in Toronto. Yeah. And he needs to be more efficient. But that being said, what you touched on, Jerry, is the fact that they have a piece like Rudy Gay, they have a DeMar DeRozan, they have Kyle Lowry, they have a team with a core that should be able to contend in the playoffs in the East. And moving on from here, there is signs that they can grow to a very talented nucleus. But I think you have to sever the culture in the front office with Brian Colangelo.
Yeah, you need to turn the page. There's a new chapter that needs to be.
And you know what's funny there? They're going to turn the page, and the Raptors may become a playoff team, much like the Leafs have gotten themselves in a playoff position this year. Everybody's saying, "Oh, well, they're doing it all with Burke's pieces." Oh, they're going to say the same thing next year when the Raptors, if they become a playoff team. Oh, but it's all Brian Colangelo's pieces.
And that seems to be
who
a
cares
theme
what
in
pieces
Toronto.
they are?
As long as they make the playoffs, fans will just quickly forget about what just happened. Because you mentioned Brian Burke. Yeah, the team has this whole Burke thing with the Leafs, but I think a big thing that's changed in Nazem Kadri's development is no more Brian Burke. And I think if you get rid of, let's say Colangelo is gone by the end of the year, that this offseason for the Toronto Raptors becomes critical because now you're turning the page, you're doing a fresh start. And you already have a great piece in there, and then you have DeMar DeRozan who's still there. Valanciunas will continue to develop. Allen Anderson off the bench. There's opportunity for this team to grow. It just needs to be done sooner rather than waiting an extra 2-3 years again.
And this is a team that even a first-round exit would still be a positive sign for this fan base.
Getting this team over 500 is a positive.
Because that's the thing. People forget that they're chasing the Bucks, and yes, we want to get in there in the 8th seed and, see some playoff. That means they're going to be matching up against the Miami Heat in the first round. And if they don't get swept in 4 games, then slap me silly and call me Susan, because that is not happening. They're not going to win a game. They're not going to win a game against the Miami Heat, thanks to the board op Jeff Ryman there.
On that, I had to cut one of the Miami Raptors games. That game went to overtime. There was a lot of moments that the Raptors had that they could have won in Miami.
Okay, but that
would have been
but that's different. That's one out of 82 regular season games. We're talking about a scenario where the Heat are going to be gunning for the Raptors in a 7-game series. That's way different than one night in the middle of March or middle of January.
A perfect example. Look at Indiana last year. Indiana's a better team than Toronto, no question.
Indiana's head and shoulders above Toronto.
But look at what they did. They had Miami on the ropes for a little bit. They were up
for a little bit.
No, they
were
Jerry,
up in
I
that
totally
series.
agree with you. The fact that they took it to 6 games was a fantastic sign for the Pacers.
I don't see them beating them this year. If they met, there's no way. Who's going to beat them?
Okay, Miami this year in the East is clear-cut favorites, but I'm just saying the possibilities there. We've seen it before. We can look at the LA Kings, going back to hockey, and the LA Kings last year on the run they made.
No more analogies to hockey. When we're talking about playoff basketball, it's a totally different beast in the NHL.
I know,
NHL is built on parity. The NBA, there's only 4 or 5 teams who can win a championship every year, so it's not a good analogy. Sorry.
I'm just using the eighth seed kind of momentum.
If the Raptors do squeak into the 8th spot, do they re-sign Colangelo because it's his last year?
You never know what could happen in this city. This city is one of the craziest media markets in the world. Anything at any time.
Yeah,
can
Jerry,
happen.
you make a good point.
And we're lucky to be a part of it, though.
A first round sweep could save Brian Colangelo's job.
If this team makes the playoffs, I still think Colangelo would leave, but the momentum that's gained by the city and the team, because it would be a remarkable turnaround. No one would see it coming. Well, it would be a perfect way to go into the future.
Let's not lose sight of the fact that this team started 4-19 in their first 23 games of the season.
DeRozan's gonna have to be big every game like last night. He's gonna have to do that on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, you see how we're talking about the Raptors now? Imagine if this happens to the Blue Jays. If they get behind, what this city will happen. This city will go bananas after everything that's happened.
Well, that's the interesting thing, too, because the Jays haven't won anything yet.
That's the thing.
But their expectations entering the season are sky high. And it's the thing that we talk about. We just said that if the Raptors somehow went on a crazy run and managed to meet up with the Heat in the first round of the playoffs, even if they get swept, expectations and hope would still be high for this season. But if the Toronto Blue Jays make the playoffs and lose in the first round, or say they get in that new wild card situation and they play a 1-game playoff against whoever, the Yankees, and lose, then there's gonna still be backlash in this city.
You're listening to CSM Sports Wrap. Adam Nightingale, Shane O'Farrell, Jerry DuPont, and Kris Gloeckler here. You mentioned the Blue Jays. They had a 1-0 victory over the New York Yankees today in spring training. Pretty solid game for them. We saw a lot of regulars in the lineup today. Jose Reyes, Melky Cabrera, Jose Batista, Rajai Davis. So it's good to see that the regulars are getting their work in spring training.
Definitely. And you touched on the fact that it was 1-0 win. So that's obviously a good performance from the Jays pitching staff, who had been very suspect in recent memory. Mm-hmm. We're looking at yesterday's game against the Houston Astros. 10-1 they lost. So, I mean, to come up and throw up a 0 today, and then especially get 2 scoreless innings out of Brandon Morrow, it's a nice little positive sign. Nothing to go home and party over, but it's definitely a nice little positive sign for that rotation.
Yeah. Jay Happ pitched 1 inning. Good news for you Yankees fans out there. He didn't break anybody else's arm with his pitch this time.
Well, Jay Happ has already fulfilled his role for the season. I think he's already surpassed expectations by knocking Granderson out for 10 weeks. Not to sound like a poor sport, but that's a huge loss for the Yankees. And, obviously then a huge gain for the Blue Jays, the fact that they don't have to face Granderson for the first month and a half of the regular season.
One pitcher that on the Blue Jays especially is Sergio Santos. I mean, he was brought in to be that closer, known as a fireballer. He struggled last year. He got injured. He pitched 1 inning today. He's had his velocity back up in spring training. Is that if the Blue Jays remain healthy? I know it's a little bit early, but if the Blue Jays remain healthy, is there a strong possibility that they make the playoffs?
If they remain healthy, I think so. With that pitching staff, but see, that's the thing though. With R.A. Dickey, Josh Johnson, Mark Burley, and Ricky Romero. They are going to need those guys to go deep in games because we've seen in years past with Toronto Blue Jay closers, they have tendencies to blow leads.
PJ Ryan, perfect example of that.
Casey Janssen was solid last year in the closer's role, and they've obviously rewarded him by giving him the outright closer role again this year. No competition right now from Santos unless Janssen struggles out of the gate. But this is an interesting thing watching the Jays here. Yes, we've been touching on how talented they are on paper, but this is going to be a season where how important chemistry is.
Absolutely.
And things that are things that you can't really quantify with statistics, right? Yes, they have talent in every position almost this year. And the trades, they brought in Dickey and Reyes and Johnson and Burley, but it's not much is very organic about this Blue Jays team. It's all been kind of hodgepodge thrown together. A lot of these guys are coming here without playoff experience. The only guy who's won a World Series on this roster, if I'm correct, is Mark Burley, and that was way back in 2005 with the Chicago White Sox. Yep. So, I mean, yes, the Jays have the talent on paper, but you can't just see it. You see it all the time in sports. You saw it with the 2011 Red Sox. Heck, you saw it last year with the Miami Marlins. They were the offseason winners last year, won 69 games this year. So Toronto fans are just so desperate for that winner. They're already anointing the Blue Jays, as favorites to win the World Series. I'd say don't get too ahead of yourself because even you're seeing it this year with the Los Angeles Lakers. Teams and championships can't be won on paper. And there has to be a certain organic element with chemistry and everything.
But I mean, in years past, it's been the Toronto Blue Jays can't drive in the runners in scoring position, and now they got the speed to do it, I think. And that'll help them a lot with the Jose Reyes on first and double score him.
That's the thing. I mean, when you look at it, there's no excuses that can be made for this Blue Jays team. Because if injuries start happening, I mean, you can't count that as an excuse. Injuries are going to happen, especially in baseball. When you play 162 games, that is a long season. And there's going to be points when you're going to miss some of your best guys. And guys like R.A. Dickey might have an off game. Like we saw in one of the spring training games, he gave up 4 hits and 2 runs. I mean, there's going to be times when this team is going to need to bail out its pitching staff. But, I mean, as many of the moves that Toronto has made, I think we've forgotten a little bit of what the Los Angeles Angels have done. Because they've bolstered their lineup pretty well last time I remember.
Definitely. If you're looking at what I look at is in the American League is the Los Angeles Angels have the best lineup 1 through 9, but the Blue Jays have undoubtedly the best rotation in my mind.
And that's where chemistry I think is going to be a huge thing going into this season. Because we talk about how the Blue Jays have gotten better. Of course, the Angels have gotten better. The Yankees, as much as still goes against them, the Yankees are always going to be there. There's always the aura about the New York Yankees. And I mean, we remember what happened with Boston. Boston was supposed to be the best team baseball had ever seen.
The best team since the 1927 Yankees, according to the Boston Herald.
And now this is a really interesting season this year because there's so many storylines that are coming together. And now the Blue Jays, as Canada's only team, can really put Canadian baseball back on the map like it was in 92, 93, and then how it progressed.
Jerry,
this is the opportunity to restore that legacy.
I see what you're saying. I think it's already been put back on the map just because the desperate nature of this franchise experiencing no postseason success of any kind since '93. Even just the hype, and I always talk about this. The Blue Jays marketing is some of the most fantastic marketing I've ever seen. They've really branded this team as the next exciting thing for Canadian fans to watch. And the hype right now, like we've been saying this whole segment, is overflowing. And you just hope for the sake of Toronto franchises that they can deliver on this hype, because this city is desperate for a winner, and we all know that.
And to add to that, the Rogers Center undergoing a big renovation this offseason. So something to look forward to. This has been CSM Sports Wrap. On behalf of Jerry DuPont, Kris Gloeckler, and Shane O'Farrell, I'm Adam Nightingale. Have yourself a great afternoon.